Hi everyone and welcome back and welcome to my another video. This is episode 6 and in this video we are going to talk about Prisma with nestjs. That is a little bit different. So we have already covered about Prisma with MongoDB, Express app, Prisma with Postgres, Express app. Now we are just changing the Node.js framework. Earlier we were talking about Express. Now instead of Express we are talking about nestjs framework. Okay. So things are going to be the same from the Prisma API, like the Prisma migrations, Prisma Generate, Prisma Migrate, and then the Prisma APIs, like you wanted to insert, update, delete, find, all these different APIs. The only thing is we are going to just write a couple of few more modules, like the Prisma module we are going to write in the nestjs. So this is the basic folder structure for nestjs app. I'm not going into the details, like this is a CLI generated app and here we can see the Prisma client is there, and rest all are like we are going to write a user APIs, blog post kind of APIs. So for that I have just added the dependencies. Okay, now what we need to do is we already have Postgres running, that we just need to make sure we already have a Docker Compose file. I will just delete the MongoDB temporarily. Then I will say Docker Compose up. That will give me the Postgres container. That's what I want. Okay. Yeah. Now moving to the code. Code structure is similar. The nestjs app. Now, if you look into SRC, we are going to create a Prisma module, and this is the Prisma inside a root folder. Here we are going to add a Prisma schema file. Okay, and all the migrations will go inside this folder. Here we can create our root module. Currently it's app module. Main.ts is looking for app module, and inside app module we are going to define a lot of new things, right? The user modules, blog post modules and all. So first of all we will create a Prisma folder here, and we are going to create a Prisma module. Like in the TypeORMs we always create entities, and entities indirectly provides us the repositories to access the database tables. Here it's a little bit different, right? We are using the Prisma client, right? So we have to just write a Prisma module and the Prisma service to access the Prisma client, which we are going to generate through the Prisma generate command. Okay, I mean there are different ways of doing it. Either you can create a Prisma schema file first, schema.prisma file we can generate, and that will contains the schema. Okay, what is the database, what are the typings, all those things we are going to have. So schema.prisma file, and inside this we can define the data source, that is the first thing, and then all our models, like we are going to have model user, then model post, all those let's say what we are going to do is let's define quickly all the models. Model user, here we are going to have ID, which is integer, default auto incremented, and what else we have, email, which is of type string. We can just add a unique, name is a string, password is a string. Okay, then we have address, which is pointing to another collection, another table address, and here we can have relations, and we will map these fields address ID here to references ID. Okay, so there will be addresses we are going to create, and this is the primary key for any relationship. And address ID, here address ID will be of type integer, and then we have another thing is the posts, which will be of type post array. Okay, now here we can define the address model address, and inside address what all attributes we have, that we will define here. So inside address schema, it will be just like, okay, id, name, state, country, street, something like that. Street, city, state or country should be good. Okay, now we have the post. Post is also another schema, another schema model which we need to define here. I can add it here, model post, that will have id auto incremented. Okay, what else we are going to define here? It is complaining addresses. Okay, now inside post we have a auto incremented id, title, content, and here we are going to have a relationship with user. So let's say this is the post, I will define author. Author has a relationship with the user, and here relations. Here I will pass fields, which is okay, let's call it as the author id here, and it will be have a references with the id, and author id is of type integer in the same table. Author id is integer. And now the last column, let's fix these things, what is missing here. Format with Prisma, same error propagated everywhere. Okay, everything is looks good. There is an address, there is a post, post has an author, and then there is address id, address has a. Now if you look into the address schema, that contains the user object. This will be user object because a single user can have multiple address or a single address. Street is just a string. Okay, so three schema models we have, and our provider is a PostgreSQL. So we already have a container up and running. We just define the models user, post, and address. We can also have a category that is about the post. Okay, what all categories a post can have. So inside post we can just add category. Okay, and then we just need to create the category model. So inside categories we are going to define the category, that is let's define it here, model category, and inside this you will have, okay, the id, which is same, and couple of columns, id, and then we have a name of the category, let's say the technical blog, technical post, non-technical post, or something like that, and it has the posts. That's it. So this defines all different kind of relationship we have. So here you can see the post and category is many to many, because one category can belongs to multiple posts and single post can belongs to multiple category. Okay, and rest all is like, okay, there is a user will have an address, user will have a multiple post, a single user can write multiple posts, so that is a post array, and single post will belongs to a single user only. So there is a one to many relationship. Here is the many to many relationship, and one to many relationship between user and address. Okay, so now npm install is done. We have everything ready. Now what we can do is we can just execute these commands, npm run migrate, and in the package.json we have this migrate script which is doing Prisma migrate dev. Okay, that should be able to run the migration, and then we will execute npm run generate to generate the Prisma client. Okay, so it is doing the Prisma migrate, and after that it may ask about the name. Okay, so I will say initial migration. It will just check the schema.prisma file. I mean, this is the default location. It will look inside a root folder or Prisma folder, and inside that schema.prisma. And I think migration is created inside a single file because we are running all these together. So it has created these tables, and there is a category to post. This is many to many table. All the other tables have been created. We can also execute npm run generate command, which will generate the Prisma client, and then we will write first Prisma module, because like if you remember the type ORM or any kind of ORM, you use the repository, you inject the repository inside services. Here we don't have a repository, here we don't have entity classes. So how we are going to access? We will create a one Prisma module. That Prisma module will provide us the Prisma service, Prisma client service, that we can inject in the constructor of each and every service, and you will have access to Prisma dot model name. Okay, so for that we need to write Prisma service. Inside Prisma we can create a new file, and then just a simple Prisma client. So here it is going to be injectable service, and we can say export class Prisma service. That is going to extend Prisma client, and this is going to help us a lot because Prisma client, from the Prisma client we can know that you are connected to the Prisma client or not, and we can also implement some lifecycle method of nestjs, like implements on module init, and on module destroy. These are lifecycle methods which we can use to initialize the connection of the Prisma. So here we need to override these two methods, on init and on destroy. I will write it then. Async on module init. I was thinking if autocomplete can give me both the methods automatically, or I can write them. On module destroy. What we are going to do here, we already extending the Prisma client service, so we can simply say is this dot dollar. This will give us, if everything is good, it should be able to give us the connection, and here we can just say this dot disconnect. That's it. Now you create a Prisma module, import this Prisma service as a provider, and make this exportable also. So you can export this Prisma, you can import this Prisma. Okay, so we have created a service, and then what I will do, I will just create a Prisma module, prisma.module.ts, and Prisma module is nothing but it will just you will just import these services. We just have a Prisma service, and now this Prisma module is exporting this Prisma service, and through this Prisma service we should be able to access any Prisma models. Let's say I wanted to access posts, user, address, tags, or categories, anything we can access from there. Okay, let's see that. So now we can focus on creating the APIs. So you can see in the SRC we can create our all the folders like categories, post, Prisma we already have. So let's say we have category. So you already know the nestjs structure. We create controller, service, DAO, DTO, all the required things inside this folder. It's like very simplified folder structure we are using for now. This is users, categories, and then we have hosts. These are the three schema models we have. And on top of the user, we also going to have authentication. Authentication means once user is, because we are going to have a login register and then verifying the token, so we are going to create auth guard. We are going to use a passport local strategy for protecting the routes, so that only logged in user with the token can only access them. So we'll start with categories because this is a simplified. Here we just need to create controller and service. Controller.ts, and then we will create one service. Then because we are going to write the API, so it's better we create a DTO also here. So either you can create a folder DTO, and inside that you can create category DTO.ts. Okay, so DTOs, and you can also put exceptions and all the other folders. If you wanted to throw some custom exceptions which are extending the HTTP base exception, like not found, authorized, unauthorized, all these things. Now coming to the service, we are going to create service first. Service is the end goal, right? So services are injectable services. So I will just write one, and then we will follow the same structure everywhere. This is injectable service. We can just simply say export class or export default class category service. And that's it. Inside a constructor, we will do the dependency injection of Prisma client service. Private read only Prisma service, and we will inject Prisma service. What does that means? Now we can access the Prisma service inside these controller methods. Okay, everything looks good now. This is injectable, and now we can define all the methods like get all categories, get all category. What we are going to do here is return this dot Prisma service dot. Okay, we have different methods, so we can simply say is this dot Prisma service dot which particular models you wanted to access, category dot find many, because we wanted to return all, and this is going to return a promise. Either we can create this method as async Prisma promise. So let's create the async and return await, and similarly define all the methods you want. Let's say I wanted to also create category, get category by ID. I will be passing ID as a number, and Prisma service dot category dot find unique. That's the method change. Find unique, and it should be where close here. ID is this. If we found category, so we will say if we found the category, then we will return it. Otherwise, we will return 404 not found exception. Then we can simply say throw new category not found exception, and we are going to create this custom exception. So we can use this exception folder we have created what we need to do is not found exception. And how we can create a simple exception is we can create a simple class category not found exception extends. It should extend the HTTP exception not found exception, and then this is it. You can actually call the constructor of the not found exception. Okay, this is the post ID category with ID not found, export default category not found exception, and we can import this wherever we are using in the category service. Category not found exception, import this. Otherwise, if everything is good, we got the category, return the category. That's it. So we have these two methods ready. It is still showing warning. Okay, it needed one argument, which is post ID category ID. So get all category. Now inside category service we can have update, delete, create category. So let's convert this into create category. Inside create category, prisma.category.create, a simple method we have, and here we just need to pass data, and we are passing category, that is the input parameter, and category will be of type category DTO. That DTO we are going to use. So let's create this DTO, which we are going to use inside a controller and inside a services category DTO. So this is export class. So DTO means like the attributes which you wanted to pass inside the create DTO. So we just wanted to pass only the name. So here we can use the class validator. This should not be empty, is not empty or is defined, and we just have the property name as a string. And you can also define the API properties and all if you wanted to expose these things inside Swagger. We have, okay, I don't have a nestjs Swagger module, I think that's why it is not accepting that. This is the create category DTO, and whenever we wanted to update, then all that DTO also we can create here only. Export class update category DTO. Just like very simple example, inside update this can be optional, and whenever you add optional, all the other class validation becomes disabled. So either you even say age string is not empty, when you put is optional, that means now it is optional. So I just add imports. So this is our update category DTO. I mean, we can at least make the ID as the required, but that is fine because ID will be the request parameter. You can pass it or not pass it, it doesn't matter. String not empty is optional. This is update DTO, and then we have, that is it. Okay, now we can use these. Go to category service, and this is create category DTO. I mean, we have covered all these kind of things a lot in the previous examples, wherever I have covered these. Now this is update category. Here we will pass, we will get the category as update category DTO. Okay, now it's update. So what we are going to do in the update, we will just check first. Okay, does this really exist? I mean, you can do it two ways. Either you first check if category exists with this ID. So inside update you will get the ID as a number, and then category. There are two ways. Either you first verify that this really exists. If category exists, existing category, let's say, If existing category is not there, then you can throw, otherwise category exists. So what you can do is return await this dot prisma service dot category dot, it will be simple update, and we just need to pass the where clause. We already verified that this really exists, so we don't need to worry about if it is not going to be there or not. Where clause id, so this is id, and then data. For data it is category. That's it, and we are returning that. So this is an update. So if existing category is not null, that means id exists, then we can simply update it. Okay, simply category service methods we have created. Now similarly we can create posts, we can create users, right? And we can also create a authentication module. Authentication modules will contain, okay, the controllers, modules and services. Like we also wanted to implement simple login, okay, that we can do by creating the auth controllers and modules and services. So now let's start with authentication. We are going to create authentication controller, services and all. So first is auth.controller and then auth.service. We are going to create a simple login, register and all these kind of system. We are going to generate a token, and then we are going to access the protected API protected by guard. And here we can create a DTO, and inside DTO what all DTOs we have is login DTO and the register DTO. We can create a simple file also inside DTO, login.dto.ts, and then one is the register DTO, because we are going to create two methods, register.dto.ts. Starting with the login DTO, it's going to be the simple, right? What we need is we just need an email and password. And then in the register DTO, we are going to have email, name and password that we can put here, or both the DTOs are ready. Now we can start writing our controller. And I think we forgot to create category module here, because we have to bundle everything inside a module. Category.module.ts, that we will add the code later. So controller services, and then we will also create auth.module.ts. We will combine everything here, like the providers, the controllers and everything inside a auth module. Okay, so other things we can add, like the authentic JWT strategy, local authentication guard and all. So auth controller, inside auth controller we can just simply create a ES6 class. The thing is, we are creating everything from scratch. I can copy these examples from our previously created samples. So this is auth, this is the controller, and we can simply say export class auth controller, and here we are going to use constructor, and we are going to inject auth service, private read only, that we are going to create auth service. And then we can start defining all our controller routes. Let's say login, register and all. And we are also going to have a service. So go to our service. Here the annotation will change, that we have imported from the Prisma service, and we have to, because now we are dependent on the Prisma module, right? So we have to import the Prisma module inside our main modules. Same we have to do inside our category module also. So let's do that here first inside category module, because we are dependent on Prisma service. So Prisma module, I think we have created one, and then category controller. So what is the name here is the category controller. Now we define all the methods like okay, get by id. So how we define the controllers? Get simply, and let's say I'm trying to do is get by id. Then we define get category by id. So here we have to pass the params. Param is of type id. I mean this is the DTO, and it is taking find one param. Okay, and then we can simply just do is return await this dot category service dot get category by id. That's it. And we just need to pass the category id here. We have to convert this into a sync. And just import this machine. So this is the get. Right now we can have all the methods. Okay, get all category. You don't specify id here, and just change the method to get all category. There is no arguments we are passing. We are just saying, we just change the methods get all category. So it's good that you create first service, then controller, and then module. Everything will get covered using this. And then we have, okay, let's say you wanted to create a category. Okay, so here the method will be post. You can get category by id, but when you wanted to post, we are going to protect this route later. First, for now we can just say is create category, because what we want is while you wanted to do a create operation, you should be a logged in user. Okay, and here we are getting the data from the body, and this is the create category DTO. This body we can pass in the method. This is create category, and this DTO object body we need to import. This is our post method. Okay, maybe I have changed a different method. Okay, let's undo this. I have to change this one. So here we will be adding body, and this is of type create category DTO, and in this service we are going to call create category and pass category object. Okay, this is fine. We are adding body, and this is the post, and then last one is the update. So inside a patch or update you can create the last method, and then we will create a module. So this, instead of create, it will be update, and inside we are passing two things here. Inside update, one is the param and one is another thing is the payload body. So param we can pass here, so this is category update category by id. So first we are getting the id. Okay, just remove this thing and we are good. So what this find one param is doing, it's nothing but it's just a simple transformer, because whenever we pass the route parameter, it always accepts them as a string. So it is just transforming that string to a number. This is the must. Otherwise you have to transform it after receiving inside a controller, right? Because these are the primary keys of the category table, which is the id, auto incremented id, and here also patch id, update by id we are doing, and the method we change here is update category, and it takes two arguments. First is the id, and now updating it in the different place. Sorry for that, that was not the right place. And here we are passing two arguments. One is the ID, another is a category. And this is update category DTO. Everything looks good. You can check back here, get by ID, create, which is post. Here this is update by ID. Okay, now we can create a category module. Inside category module we are going to, so how to create a nestjs module? You can import the category controllers. I think the names are different, so we'll import all these things. This is a category controller, then we have category service, and this is ng module, so import that from common, and then we are exporting this Prisma module we are getting from src. Everything looks good. Now we are injecting the Prisma module. We are adding the Prisma module in the import so that we can use the Prisma service. If you see the Prisma module, we are exporting this service so that I can use this particular service inside my Prisma inside category module. Inside category module, inside category service, we are using Prisma service because Prisma module is already added in the import declaration of category module. Otherwise, you will see the dependency injection error here. Now moving back to the auth controller, I can copy a little bit couple of things from here so we can speed up things. Here it will be auth and it will be auth controller and it will be auth service here instead of category service. We are going to write the service soon just after this, and we have some DTOs. We'll create them. Now here is the first method is inside auth controller is the login. Let's say that you are trying to do the login. So let's say we have register and login, both will be the post. So we remove all the other non-required methods. So I'll just convert this into post. Okay, post is first of all the register. Auth register is the route. This will become the route for us to hit from the API, and this is async register. And what we are getting things inside body. Register DTO, and it is of type register DTO. Okay, and then we are going to write auth service dot register, and we'll just pass this data. Now this service will decide what needs to be done. And another API we have important one is the login. Inside login we are going to do a couple of things. So this is login. Inside login also we are going to receive the data inside a body, and then auth service dot login. Let's say this is a kind of method we are doing. Okay, now we are going to use the passport strategy, I mean GWT strategy, local authentication strategy, and then we are also going to add a guards. Okay, so let's do this from the register. Register will be the open API. There will be nothing. The objective of register is to create the data inside database. So first let's create a auth service here, and we'll copy the category service. Auth service inside auth service, and here we can injectable. This is auth service. Remove all the other non-required things. Remove the non-required imports. So this is our auth service. Now inside auth service, what we are going to do for the register, first we will define the register method. So this will be public async register, and what we are getting in the payload, we are getting the register data. Data is of type register DTO that you can import here, register DTO, and then here we will start. Okay, we already have the validations through the DTO. We will add a validation pipe. The validation is not happening until unless you don't add a validation pipe at the controller level. So we will just use hashed password. We are using await bcrypt. Okay, this module we have to import, that's not there because we are doing registration, and here we are going to create a hash version of the password. So bcrypt, this will generate the password for us. This is data.password. Now we have the password. We can just do try catch. I mean, you can also wrap this inside a try catch if anything goes wrong here. Okay, now after the password we can just do a create user, const create user. Const created user, because user creation is simple. What we need to do, await this dot prisma service dot user dot create, sorry, this is create method, and inside create we need to pass the payload, and here you can see inside the data. So here we have a registration data. Okay, we have a data, and then we can just override the password value to this hashed password. See what happens. Is not assignable to type. Should I just do dot dot dot? So create generally takes data as an argument. You can see the data, and then we override the definition. So if let's say I wanted to create a data like this, either I can spread all these properties, or I can just directly assign, or I can create a payload. I mean, it should work, but let's see password. This is the payload I have. I have constructed that, and I can just pass this payload in the data. Password email is not assignable to what is error? Address is missing in the type password, but required in the types. Okay. So what we have to make this relationship optional here, because inside auth service this is not allowing us to create user. What it is saying is property address is missing in type, right? Okay, it is saying that address is required in our schema. So what we can do is, let's go to our schema. We can put address ID also optional, and inside address entity we already, a user is already optional. So what we can do is we can generate again npm run generate. I think there is no any error or warning. This time it should work. Address ID, which is integer optional, if this relationship is optional. Okay, and then we will check the Prisma client. Not modules, and here is our Prisma client, and you can see address ID is null or number. Now it should allow us to create a user without address. Here we are inside auth service. It works, right? Now it is accepting this, and we are able to create a user without address. So we are inside authentication service, and this is the register method. So once the user is created successfully, so this is the created user, we can just return the created user by setting up the password empty. Created user password empty, and then we can return that user. And inside error, let's say if we are not able to create a user, then there are two possible causes, because if you see in the side of Prisma, schema Prisma, the email is unique. So what you can do is either you can validate, okay, email, there is no user exist with this email. So this is always a good approach, that either you can create a, because we are already in service method, so we can just check public async, check user, we just pass the email, check user exists. This is the right way, because here you will find if this user exists or not, and we can do the same logic. What we are doing here is we are going to just check if the user exists. So user dot find unique, and this is the where clause. Email, okay, and if we are able to find the user, if there is a user object, if user object is null, check user exists, return false, otherwise return true, something like that. This we can use if user exists, if user is null, that means user doesn't exist, return false, otherwise return true. And the same logic can use here, because email is unique. This dot check user exists and data dot email before even creating that user. And then if we can do is, if user exists is going to return false, that is a favorable condition for us. So we will just put a negation here. User does not exist, then only we are doing all these things. If user exists, then we can just put some exception inside else block, throw new HTTP. There is a conflict exception we can also throw. I mean, you can customize these exceptions. User already exists with same email, or unprocessable entity 244, whatever you want, it will return to 409. Okay, this is the one thing. And even if if there is any internal exception occurred, then we cannot do anything. We will just throw an exception with the internal server error, or we can just say is internal server exception occurred. That's it. It will customize the message automatically, because we are using HTTP based exception and it is being thrown from the service. So it will go to the controller, and controller will directly throw to the UI. Okay, so this is our register method. Now we can think about how we are going to do with the login. So login will go to the controller. The login will be a little different, because registry is open API. In the login, we have to first check the user and all these things. So this is going to return HTTP code. Also you can define this, you can define on all the controllers, HTTP code 200, and this is the post is login, and here we are getting the login data. So let's say if I wanted to use a request response object, right? So you can also use request with user, because we are getting the user, and then there is a response, because once user is logged in, we are going to send cookies in the response. So that's why I'm using response instead of returning directly things from here. Import request response. This request is of type request with user. So it's like we have created a custom, we have to create a custom interface. We can put this here, request with user. It is extending the request, and this is the user object. User type we are getting from the Prisma client. Okay, because now what we want is, once user do the login, we wanted to bind the user object inside a request object. So request with user is already there. Why it is complaining sometimes? Okay, this request is coming from Express, that we can import. Simple nestjs login register we are writing. Okay, and then this is what we have is, we have a couple of things inside a controller. We are getting the request object. From request object we can get the user. Now you might be thinking why I'm not writing it as a straightforward, right? Okay, why I'm updating this? Why I'm not using just a simple DTO and all? Because we are going to use guard here. That guard will verify if user is logged in, if user is, I mean, you have passed the valid credentials. If everything is valid, it will even capture the user, and it will populate the logged in user inside request.user. So we are going to create a guard for that, and we got the user. And then if everything goes fine, here we will do tbd to be done, and everything is good, then we can just simply say response.send body to be used. So here we are creating the response object, response.send. This response is of type express. And then we can simply say response.send the user, the logged in user. Okay, so here we need to calculate this user object, and how we are getting this is not the email password. What we are going to do is, we are going to use this guard. This guard will extract the request object, will validate the login and all. So here login authentication guard we are going to create. So it's all about, we are going to fill this authentication with all the auth strategy and all. So that I already have, I mean, instead of writing all those things. So this is the local authentication guard. It is extending the auth guard local. Okay, and this is the request with user interface. This is the token payload, right? We are just going to populate user ID inside a token. Okay. Now going back to our controller, auth controller, here we can import this guard. So this local authentication guard will use this local strategy of passport, right? We are going to use auth guard here. Here it is using auth guard from the passport, right? So we have to define the JWT strategy and the local strategy. So that also I can explain all those things, all the three things we are going to import inside authentication, because I'm copying this from my previous example which I have created for authentication. So this is the important part, JWT strategy. This is actually extracting the token and all these things. And then first of all, let's take a look on authentication. So this is the local strategy. This is the important part. What it is doing is, this is being used for our login mechanism. So our local authentication guard is using that auth guard, and this is the local strategy. what we are doing in the local strategy is we are saying that okay, username field is email. What you need to see is, what you need to do is, through some service you just need to validate okay, this user really exists with this email or password or not. That's it, right? And what you need to do is you can create a user service here, simple user service.ts, and inside user service we can just say okay, this is the password and this is the email. Does this user really exist? So we are going to define the authentication method here. This is a local strategy. We are going to write authentication service. So let's create this inside auth service only. Inside auth service we will just define the method verify user, get authenticated user. Let me just local strategy get authenticated user. This we are going to create inside auth service. So here we can say public async get authenticated user. Here we are going to have two arguments, email as a string and the password. Then we can just put a try catch wrapper and we can do all our stuff here inside the try catch just to validate if user really exists. Okay, inside try catch first we will just check const user if user really exists, this dot, and here we can use either the same service or let's say I have a user service because we are going to write some user controller also, and here I can just do is get by email. I will pass the email and then await this dot verify password, and I'm just passing two things here, the plain text password and the user password. And if everything is good we will just return the user, right? So we are going to use user service here. Inside user service I can define this method get by email, that will do our stuff. Like inside user service we can simply create one method get by email, and we have already done this many times. Here is my user service injectable because I wanted to just isolate things. Export class user service, and here inside a constructor I can inject the Prisma service. Prisma service, and here I can define these methods get by email, user not found exception. I will just simply say is not found exception. Okay, so we are using user service, and I will create a module also here, which is because we have to use this user service inside authentication module. So user.module.ts. Inside user module what you will do is you will just use the same stuff which we have created inside category module. Instead of creating this we can copy a couple of things from here. Category module, and then here it is our user service. We are still dependent on the Prisma module. Here we can just say I have a user service, and then we can just export this user module providers, and here I need to define exports. Okay, I'm also exporting this user service so that someone else can use it, and I can just inject this user module inside authentication module, and here is auth module. We have to define the auth module here, so I will copy the category module, and then we will run this application whatever we have created till now. So we are dependent on the user module, sorry, Prisma module and the user module. We are going to create authentication controller, and then there is a auth service, and user module we have to import. So let's see how it goes. Let's import the user module. That's it. So we have everything now. Now you can access the user service inside this authentication service. So coming back to our auth service, this user service we have to inject first on the top. This is how the dependency injection works. Private read only user service, and import the user service here. And then we can start accessing the user service, and you can see we got the one method get by email. Now we just need to write our verify password method. So verify password method is in the same, it's just using bcrypt compare, right? We can define this private async verify password, give me two passwords to compare. First is the plain text password, and another is a encrypted password. Okay, we got the both the strings, and then how we compare is we can just return is password equal, and we can simply say is await bcrypt. Do we have it here? Bcrypt dot compare, and we just pass both the password, plain text password and hashed password, which is just a password for us. And if password is matching, is password equal? If this is false, then what we will say is throw new http, or let's say http. We can just return a custom exception here because we need to send a message also. We can say is wrong email password provided and http exception, http status, what is the status dot bad request, we can say. Okay, just format our code a little bit and then we will revisit this. Yes, so now this looks little straight now. What we are doing, register and then get authenticated user. This we are getting called from our authentication strategy, local strategy. We already have authentication service here, that is auth service. So we'll just import this here. Okay, authentication service has the get authenticated user method. Now what it is doing, local strategy is actually saying that okay, inside a payload there is an email attribute, get that, pass that email attribute here. Okay, and once you have the both the payload, we just validate that email and password here. So this is responsible for returning the user object, and the same user object we will go to the controller back and it is attaching that user object to the request, and we are getting that user object here. Now what we need to do is, if we are able to get the user object, that means you are successfully logged in. We will create a token, we will send you a token in the cookies, or we will return you the token directly.